Welcome to Lumient Live. I'm your host, Mark Ackroyd. Lumient Live is the podcast for advice professionals that believe in a values-based advice experience, but still have that question, how does it all work? We connect listeners with other advice professionals to hear best practice client stories or business examples and lift the lid on how they made it happen. Now, on to today's episode. G'day and welcome to another episode of Lumient Live. Today I'm joined by special guest Calypso Waddell from Australian Private Capital. G'day Calypso, how are you?
I'm good. It's great to be here. Thanks, Mark.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for having you. It's good to have another Melbourneite on the podcast after, expanding our reach a little bit. It's nice to be closer to home.
I can imagine.
So for those that don't know Calypso and Australian Private Capital, let me tell you a little bit about Calypso herself, and then we'll get into learning a little bit more about APC, as we like to call Australian Private Capital. So Calypso's worked there for 6 years. She started originally as a junior paraplanner. She's always been drawn to process and organisation, so it became evident to her relatively early in her paraplanning role that she'd like to go down the management path rather than becoming a financial advisor. And with that goal, she's now been the team leader for APC for the last 2 years and manages a team of 3 associates who were previously paraplanners, a client service officer or a CSO for those that like the 3-letter acronyms, and an outsourced administration officer. So it would come as no surprise, and why I'm really excited to have Calypso on, that she offers a really different perspective for us and the types of guests that we've had on in the past, because Calypso's role makes it all happen, makes it all work, gets all the underlying process, administration, systems all working together, and it's something that we've really admired working with Calypso. So we'll go down that path today on the episode so that you can get a bit of a sense of the work that she did in bringing to life the values-based experience that they're building at APC. But enough of my voice, Calypso. Tell me a little bit about yourself, that's maybe outside the bio, and a little bit about APC.
Thanks, Mark. I have, as you said, worked at APC for 6 years and moved into the team leader role. My natural personality is for process and organisation, so I'm loving that I'm getting to move more and more into that. And APC is a very supportive environment for learning opportunities and continuing to help me grow in that space. So I really appreciate that with them. Personally, I am not originally from Melbourne. I moved over from Western Australia about probably 10 years ago now. So that was quite a big shift. I did my university degree over here. I started out in events and then found I also have a general affiliation with numbers and things like that. So I changed to banking and finance and really enjoyed doing that. I was lucky enough to get to do a little bit of my study abroad and just love, learning new experiences and going through new things. That's a big part of how I like to learn. So now I am driving a lot of operations and process around APC. Lucky enough that we're self-licensed. So it does make decision making easier when you're not having to report to someone else, and you can talk to the team and make decisions quite quickly. So that, I know it's not applicable to everyone, but it's a great thing when you have that opportunity. So a lot of my role is around developing and maintaining process now. I'm training and managing the associates team. At APC, we take a slightly different approach. All of our support staff, as they're traditionally called, are client-facing. And we also rotate advisors. So no client is wedded to one advisor. A client of APC is just that. They're a client of the firm. So there's a little bit of coordination in that, but it's great. If an advisor's away, we know our clients are fully serviced. There's no hiccups along the way. And I think over time, even though it's not traditional, clients really value that experience for us.
Yeah, so let's start there. This has always fascinated me, and I really love the approach you take at APC. So maybe let's start from the advisor lens with the client. So you mentioned that your advisors sort of share the client base. So Can you, in a practical nature, maybe talk about that, and then we'll move to the client-facing support staff angle?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of our clients come through from referrals, and I would say sort of 90% of our client base is referral based. And there will be one advisor who takes the client through that initial journey, I suppose, where there's an initial meeting, there's a statement of advice, there's an induction process. But then once they become an APC client ongoing, which is a big part of our relationship, we don't tend to do one-off advice. It's all about this supporting relationship and this really engaged client service. And then as a part of reviews, clients book in and they understand that they might see anyone. So from a practical perspective, the week before, I'll go through and I'll allocate an advisor and an associate to prepare that meeting and sit that meeting and go through everything with the client. If work comes out of that meeting, it's typically the same people that will follow through with that work.
So, you mentioned allocating there. Do you sort of manage allocations on new leads first, just to see how do you make that allocation?
The team just talk to each other, to be honest. So sometimes it will come as a specific recommendation. So someone will say, look, go see such and such. I think they'll be really helpful for you. But otherwise, the advisors just assess their work and see who can pick that up or who has some time for that.
Yeah, lovely. And tell me a little bit about the support staff side of things. So you mentioned all of your support staff are client facing, which is great. I love hearing that, especially from a client advice experience perspective. Um, what does that mean to you that they're client facing, and how have you, I guess, helped them make the shift from traditionally non-client facing roles to client facing roles?
Mm. This has always been the way APC have operated. So when I joined, this was a skill that I had to learn as well. So sitting in a client meeting and you'd still take meeting minutes and the traditional kind of tasks that you might expect, but they also our associates present the modeling most of the time, or some of the more technical things that a para planning type role might do all the investigation behind. They might talk through that. It might be insurance quotes, it might be insurance modeling. So that there's a true engagement in that meeting. They're not just sitting there taking minutes for the sake of being client facing, which our clients really appreciate, sorry. And they there are clients that will reach straight out to the associates if they've been working with them on something, which is just a nice relationship to have.
Yeah, nice. And what impact does that have, do you think, on firstly your client base and then maybe your team culture or organization?
I think the clients, once they get past the fact that it's not the norm in the industry, if they have any preconceived ideas about that, they really value it. If a client comes into our office and we will all stop and say hello as they leave from their meeting. So provided they have time, it's just a really friendly environment. It's very welcoming. We're all there to help. They're never left, such and such is on leave and you're not going to get a response for a week. So that is nice to always be able to help a client. Practically, we have to keep very good notes and we have to have a core philosophy. So, we have an investment philosophy and an approach, and this is where things like Lumion, we all have to be on the same page so that we can provide a consistent client experience, even though you might be getting a slightly different perspective from a different advisor.
Yeah, and I think that's where we want to go with this conversation today. So, a couple things that you picked up there. I love the fact that you're moving your support staff from, just traditional support staff tasks to upskilling them to present the work that they so proudly do behind the scenes, right? So, research, all that technical stuff. So, I think that's great for the development of our next generation of talent in the advice profession, but it obviously has some clear impacts for your end client as well, being able to see more and more people within your office and within your team. And that must be a nice experience for them when their advisor or their lead advisor's on leave, that they can go to anyone. But equally, when they physically come in, that everyone probably knows them by name or by story, right?
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I think it's something that a client, once they have that long-term relationship, they very much value it.
That's awesome. And so you mentioned that you, as a business, to manage that team-based approach, which, we hear murmurs is sort of like a bit of a trend in the industry now. A lot of people are moving towards that. But to pull that off, you need a core philosophy, a core approach, a core experience. Um, Tell us a little bit about how you developed that core experience or that core philosophy at APC. And how do you manage that maybe from your perspective, obviously, because you've got to, one of the things I admire about your role, you've got to bring it all together. Someone's got to be the person coordinating it. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this, the credit must go to the founders and the people who have maintained APC. So APC started with Michael Tratt 30 odd years ago, and the team have just always kept this philosophy. So when I joined, a lot of this was already in place. But, times change and things have to develop. So that's where I suppose I come in, and I'll take feedback from the team. And if you see a few things starting to maybe diverge a little bit and you can see a couple of different approaches, you bring the team together and we'll have a talk about it. And, you can have lots of good ideas, and then we come up with the best solution for APC. So I do that. I'll run process meetings and things. I'll flag feedback from the associates, or vice versa. It might be feedback from the advisors about the associates. So we keep quite a close-knit team, very open, transparent conversations. Low hierarchy helps as well. There's no one dictating how we do things. The whole team will come together and everyone's opinion is valid. Rob and Hayden, being the directors of APC, are great. They basically say, if you've got a good idea and you can support it, why would we not go ahead with it? So that culture is very long-term at APC.
Yeah, I think that's really impressive. A lot of people say those things, but not necessarily follow through with them. So, you're blessed to have great leaders there, sort of leading that change, as well as yourself making it happen. So, I'd love to take a step into, so obviously you're users of Lumient, and today isn't about being a Lumient plug, but what I think is really interesting about how we worked with you and the work that you sort of do, Calypso, that I think our audience will sort of resonate with, is how you made that big shift to take on new tech, and the impact that had from an operations and process perspective, and the work that you had to go through. Because, for someone like an APC who's been in business for 30 years, has a core approach, these decisions aren't made lightly, right? Or they shouldn't be made lightly because of all the impacts on processes, staff, everything that go with it. So if we take you back some time to when you wanted to make a shift and wanted to have a look at some new tech to bring your experience to life, what is it that you had to think through in your role to go, all right, it's time to make a shift. Here's what we need to look for. How did you go through that process?
Yeah, it was a really interesting process for us because we weren't actively looking to make a tech shift. But as we know, the industry moves so fast and these things happen. So Lumient had just come on our radar. I'd seen Santi speak at the Dimensional conference, and that looks interesting. Let's have a look at this. But then our current client portal provider gave us the news that the version we were on was being shut within 2 months. And the new version that they were proposing removed key features that our clients loved. And, we don't want to force our clients into change, especially at the cost of experience. So we said, if there's going to be a change, let's do a review. Let's see what else is out there right now. And that's when we, as a team, because it needed to happen quickly, we really banded together and all started reviewing Lumient as a product. We had a look at a few other things that were in the market, just, to make sure we weren't being closed off just because this was the one new thing that we had seen. And then we had a lot of team discussions. Lumient, there were several things that really resonated with us immediately. There were a few things in there that we wanted to improve for our clients, such as, more active and meaningful goals tracking and things like that. But overall, we were just aiming to improve the client experience, but never at the cost of, team efficiency and things like that. So sometimes we can all have these grand ideas, but if the team get too caught back in trying to implement that, that affects the client in the long run anyway.
Yeah, we often speak about on this podcast that there's sometimes a real conflict between practice efficiency and client experience. So there's always these conscious trade-offs where sometimes the practice may lose on efficiency, but the client wins on experience, and vice versa. I mean, if someone has the answer for all of them, I'd love to know. But there's just a series of trade-offs within all these experiences. So when you were working through that as a team, did you have assessment criteria, or when you were bringing those team meetings together, how did you, I guess, work through potentially those trade-offs to go, look, it gives us this, but it doesn't give us that, and that's okay?
Yeah, so I think we looked at our different technology. We looked at what's really working, what sort of is non-negotiable, what can't we lose, and then you kind of go, well, what's not working well? What have we struggled with to find a solution to? And we just laid everything out, and then we kind of left some space for what don't we know? What could someone else fill a gap here or teach us about? And that's when the discussion with Lumient, we had this base, and then we could start to see all these pieces kind of come together. You can go, I can keep this bit. We really must keep this bit. And then Lumient's giving us some new thoughts here. There was a lot of back and forth in terms of team conversations to figure out what works. How can we change our current client experience so that there's a document that's still produced that they get to keep for their records? How do we leverage what one company is offering, such as Lumient? How do we keep what we've got and not drastically change the client experience to the point where they worry about change? Some consistency is still nice. It was a lot of discussion, a lot of documenting, physically writing out what we want, what we've got, and working through it from there.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about that documenting? And I'm a journey map, advocate. I'm a documentation nerd when it comes to these client experiences. How did you how did you document what was important, what were you holding dear? What did you, and even document where you were saving space? Like, how did you document that?
So I initially quite simply started with just 4 or 5 columns of what have we got, what's working well, what works okay, what is just not working for us. And then once that base information's out, and because we keep such a consistent approach, there is one person in the office that can pretty much get the base out, and then we can start talking about it as a team and make sure we are 100% on the same page before we go out. But we didn't over engineer it. It really was quite simple. Just get a Word document, get it out, get your thoughts out, and you have this core piece of information that you can all read and you can all refer to, and then you can develop from.
Great. And so you had the 5 columns, what's working, what's not. Did you then assess that, I guess, across like different stages of the advice experience? Is that what you used as your base?
Yeah, definitely. We don't want to try and take it all on at once. So we went, okay, this is our review process. This is our initial client process. This is our statement of advice process. And then you just step through it quite simply. And the answers to an extent start to emerge. You start to see your gaps again when you do this. And you also start to hang on to those things that just really are important, that your clients really value and you don't want to lose.
I like that. I think sometimes we can get, and this might be a bit going against the Lumient grain here, but sometimes we can get really caught up in the new and fancy and forget, what's actually working and what our clients really want to hold dear. So I love the way you phrased it, which is what do we want to hold dear? What do our clients want to hold dear? And then, where do we have space to make changes? Because to your point, you don't want to change everything all at once, right? That's not great for your staff and not great for your clients.
Yeah.
So you do all that work, which sounds really impressive. And what I love about it is it sounds, from a template perspective, super simple. The hard work, as you would attest to, I guess, is maybe the conversations and trying to rein everyone in. Can you tell us a little bit about the conversations and how you facilitated those in your role?
Yeah. I mean, again, we try and keep things as simple as possible where we can. And once that information's there, if everyone can sort of read it, be on the same page, and then have these really open, transparent discussions, it also starts to create these questions. Okay, well, we really need to find out more about XYZ before we can look at this further. And so we just wrote down all our questions and prepared ourselves for, meeting with you guys and some other companies and things like that. So it I know it sounds quite simple, but I think simple works in these scenarios. You are looking at different technologies and you will have to do more complex training, but fundamentally, what do you really need? What does the client need? And we didn't need to know all about your goals tracking to see that it was more efficient than what we had, and it looks good, and we want that.
Yeah, that's great, and thank you for the plug, that it looks good, that we're trying.
Who
So
else?
let's fast forward. So you make the decision, right? You wanna proceed with, lucky us, Lumion, in this instance, but, to get outside of that, what is it that you then have to do? So you made the decision, which is quite big. How did you have to change your process? What were the internal documents that you had to change, and what was the internal training that you had to do, and sort of how did you go about it? I know that's a big question, but we'll unpack it as we go.
Yeah, sure. It is still a work in progress for us. We are very mindful of, I think bringing a new product is always easier to bring to a new client because they don't have these preconceived ideas about how their ongoing service has been for the last 5, 10, 20 years. So new clients, it's much easier. We're rolling out parts of it already. And there was immediate swaps for us, like your risk profile. Our risk profile wasn't working, it was clunky, and we immediately were happy to switch that over. So that became one quick swap. There were other things that, as Lumion has progressed, we really wanted to wait for some of these items for our existing clients. We know that there has to be a certain level of information, such as data feeds. A lot of our clients, they want their portal to be their one stop. They don't want to keep 5, 6, 7 logins for all their insurances or their investments and things. So that is a big one for us for our existing clients, and ensuring the quality of those data feeds. So we haven't all the way rolled it out to our existing clients, but all the way along, as we're learning about Lumia, we are building out our review document. So we are checking in relatively regularly with you guys and also as a team to go, well, we've discovered this new piece. Is this going to fit into the process here? Where we really are just building the templates along one another, and integrating little bits with new clients where we can.
Yeah, and I think it links back to your previous answers, right? Because you've done that work on what's a priority, what do we hold dear, where do we have flex on. It sounds to me you sort of knew what were the no regrets choices that you could make straight away, and what were the things that you'd maybe take a little bit more caution with.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And we're finding I mean, this really has been a big learning process for us. It is a new process. We feel good about it. I mean, all we want to do is enhance the client experience. And I think Lumion can really do that. It aligns with the way we want to approach things, and it provides, some efficiencies that you can't get with other technologies at the moment. So we are building out our SOAs as well. So more of the values discussion. Where do we fit that in? The risk profile is a very different approach as well. There's not a traditional number, but I love that there's videos, but we had to think through, well, is a client going to sit there and watch these videos? And then I think as long as you pre-position that with a client so that they don't open it thinking it's a 2-minute survey, they know I'm going to watch a few videos and answer a few questions. Those sorts of things we're building along the way.
Yeah, and that comes from clarity in your process and clarity in what you're doing. What I admire when we work together on what you're trying to achieve with your experience is that okay, the email can do this much, the tech can do this much. The final frontier is our prepositioning and our behavior and our skill set, right? But you don't get that clarity until you know what purpose the tech is serving for you in that experience, and then therefore what you need to do from a behavioral perspective. So let's talk a little bit about that behavioral perspective then. So in terms of pre-positioning, how did you think about your internal training of advisors and your client-facing support staff to change? You know, you used to pre-position things like this. Now we want you to do things like that. How did you think through that?
Yeah, so again, these come down to team discussions because one advisor cannot have one approach because of how we rotate advisors. So that's a really big part of APC is having these very open discussions. So we also made a very conscious decision that until the advisors are more across this, and we are rolling it out to maybe existing clients, we are going to hold off on training our support staff. So we don't want to, there's such efficiencies with Lumient that it's so easy to send a risk profile. The advisor can do it. There's no need to have support staff involved in that. And we want them to be comfortable before we bring it to the support staff because there's so much change going on in the industry. We don't want to start teaching them when they can't actively use it and learn it quickly. If you learn something and you don't pick it up for another month, it just feels like wasted time sometimes. So we have made a very conscious decision to split that learning because it is more new client orientated at this point, which is mainly advisor driven. And then once we bring to the reviews and things like that, then we'll push through to the support staff.
Yeah, I like that. I think it leans into my next question, which was going to be, you know, how did you assess which stakeholders to work with first? It sounds like, you know, you made a choice that was aligned to, well, what are the no regrets things that we can do now? Who are the people that can do it? And then how do I help them? And then everyone else we'll get to later. Is that sort of how it worked?
Yeah, absolutely. We made some very strong decisions on that it was, new clients, advisors, and then existing clients are going to need XYZ before we can really feel comfortable in pushing this to them. And at that point, we need the support staff involved. So it's sort of working out a bit of a timeline in that sense. I'm actually working through a process of documenting that timeline as we get closer and closer to some of the modules that we need for those existing clients. But yes, we did make a very strong decision on that front.
Which is great. So let's go into some of that documentation because it's very rarely spoken about, especially on this podcast. We like talking about the stories and the experiences, but super, super important for a practice to make everything work. And, you know, even for roles like yourself and the support team to be able to do their job really efficiently and effectively. So as you've done all this, what's the documentation? So what's the internal documentation that you hold dear and you sort of use within APC to make all this work?
Yeah, so we're try and use templates as much as we can in terms of our advice and our review documents and things like that. We made a very conscious decision that, our current platform would keep all the investment data. That's, not Lumient's wheelhouse. Then we knew we need to drive that part there. We need to keep this part coded in from Lumient. We also wanted to and we still are looking at what can Lumient give us based on all the inputs that we do. What does the merge document give us that, we don't want to be doing these tasks twice. So we're playing around with that at the moment, how we might actually work through it because the more technology grows and things like that, there is less of a need for a traditional document. You can walk through the client portal with them and you might produce a document just for the record of the meeting and historical changes and things if they ever want to go and look back at them. But do we need that documentation to look and feel the way it always did? The other thing that we've done is integrate some of those new elements into the SOA as we go through, and also be really mindful of, we had a project out for updating our threads and things like that in our CRM, and this is going to look quite different. So there's all those back end steps and processes that we put some of them on hold because we want to see where all these pieces fit before we go and launch it to support staff. We're waiting for hopefully the integration with our platform and how those things can just happen automatically. What can we then what do we need? What do the support staff need to remember? What needs to go into a thread? What needs to go into a task? How will that process cleanly tie off?
Yeah, okay. So it sounds to me that you start with understanding the process, you start with understanding the functionality that you want to use, and then you work all the way down to, can I template this? Can I automate this through tech? And if not, can I make it a consistent process through my process system, which is tasks and threads. Um, that's pretty cool. And then so from there, do you document around all of that, or once it's in the system, you trust the system?
I think we'd still keep documents. The challenge with threads and tasks and things is you don't see your next step until you complete the first one. So having it documented is, I think, a very helpful thing for the team, especially when you're training. You go, well, look, have a look at this. This is from the very start to the very beginning, all the different steps that you might go through. Yes, tasks and threads are so we take some pressure off our memories, but having an overview of the whole process is still really important.
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. That's awesome. So I've got another question that's maybe a little bit philosophical here, but you've spoken a lot around how you start with the experience and then you've worked backwards on the process, which is absolutely aligned to your role. In your view, does one dictate the other? Should you always start with the experience and then go to process, or can you go the other way around? Like, how did you think through that?
I think for me personally, I've always sort of developed my experience has informed a process that I apply to maybe more areas of my life than just my job. And if I'm ever unsure about something, I just get all the information, break it down, and organize it, and consider what must stay or what's non-negotiable. You get inputs, reach out to other people and things like that. I've got someone who's helping me through some leadership learning and things like that, and he's got this great approach to so many process driven things or efficiencies and productivity work. But I think if you get all of that in any scenario, you've got this really good base, you've got a really clear picture, and then you're, receptive to new ideas. If you don't have that, I think opportunities can pass you by. You don't see, oh, this piece will actually fit really well in here, or I need to make an adjustment here. Without that clarity, I don't think you can go very far, or it becomes very stressful.
Yeah. Look, what a great little tip there. I think it's cool. You're right. It does apply. The mentality does apply to so many aspects of your life. What's the experience I'm hoping to achieve out of this? What is it that I want it to look like and feel like? And then work backwards from there. What are the steps that I then need to take? And the other thing you mentioned there that I really love is, trying to gather as much experience to inform your experiences from other people, which is really cool. Calypso, you've given us a ton of insight today. I'm really, really pleased and impressed with all of the practices that you've shared around your team-based approach at APC, the way that you've sort of made that tech shift and how you thought through it, the documentation, the assessments that you had to do internally, and then how you're safely looking to roll this out within APC. I think our audience will really enjoy that. If we could bug you for one more tip for all our advice professionals that are listening, in your perspective, what would be one tip that you would recommend for those that are considering, maybe making the change and maybe embedding a values-based advice experience? What would that tip be?
I think we're faced with so much change in the industry at the moment. It's just so important to go into everything with an open mind and just a general willingness to learn. You never know what you might take out of something, even if you don't implement it, but to look at the process or review your own process and then get another opinion, I think that's invaluable.
Calypso, it's a great note to end on. On behalf of our entire Lumia Live audience, I just want to say thank you for spending the time with us today, and thank you for sharing your wealth of insights with us. I know everyone will get a ton of value out of it, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Lumient Live. If you really enjoyed it, we'd love if you could hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast provider so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes. Thanks again for tuning in.